Hello, everybody. It's nice to be with you. I'm going to talk about Sri Lankan teas. Sri Lanka is the name of the country now, but it was formerly called Ceylon, so it still continues with the name Ceylon tea. Um, but Sri Lanka, for those who are not familiar with um, the location, it is just south of India. It's an island south of India. It's so close to India that most people think that it is a part of India, but it has always been a separate country. Now, the location of Sri Lanka is very close to the equator, and therefore there are no seasons as such. Right through the year, it's summer. But the only difference is that as you grow high up in the mountains, in the central highlands, the air gets less humid and climatic conditions are different. So that is the reason why we have three uh, broad regions called low grown teas, mid grown teas, and high grown teas, categorized by elevation. And the low elevation teas uh, could be from sea level up to about 1,500 feet, and from 1,500 to 3,000 feet would be considered mid elevation, and then over 3,000 to 6,000 would be the high elevation teas. So these, within those three parameters, there are so many other variables. The cultivars, um, which are many cultivars available, and then the soil conditions and the climatic conditions and the rainfall. The amount of moisture in the leaf is a significant factor in producing good teas. So a tea produced in rainy weather would definitely not taste as good as a tea produced in dry weather, because the leaf has 50%. Sorry, I beg your pardon. 75% of green leaf is water. So when you harvest 100 pounds of green leaf, you end up with only 25 pounds of the black tea. So that is the ratio that it normally gives out. So we have the low elevation, mid elevation, and high elevation teas. This is a Vitanakanda estate in Ratnapura region. It's located at around 1,000 feet above sea level. This is Kenilworth Estate in the Genigathena region. It's at around 2,500 feet elevation. And this one is Pedro Estate with the selling name called Lover's Leap. And that is located at around 6,000 feet elevation. Now, I used to manage tea estates in that region, and I used to produce similar teas when I was superintendent of tea estates in Sri Lanka, and I'm very familiar with that manufacture. I have also worked on low elevation tea estates, but I have not worked in the mid elevation tea estates. But I'm familiar with the process and the techniques of that. So I have selected these teas because they have characteristic differences. For example, if you look at the leaf of this, it's very wiry and long, twisted. If you look at this leaf, it's smaller than the other, but still it is also wiry and well twisted. If you look at this leaf, it is smaller than both of those, but it's well twisted and it's fairly uniform. Particle sizes are pretty similar within that area. So the the styles of teas are not so important in the flavor component than actually the chemical transformation that takes place in the leaf. That is what actually contributes to the flavor of the tea. The sizing is for aesthetics. It's pretty, beautiful, nice. Doesn't mean that the smaller leaves coming from that same lot of tea that was harvested that same day will be any different in taste. If you macerate it, yes, there will be, it will be stronger, and particle size has a big part to play in the strength of the tea, because the smaller the particle size, more surface area in a given amount of tea. So if you have 2 grams of this and 2 grams of the smallest tea particles, you would definitely sure you can be absolutely certain that the smaller leaf particles will have a much more strong strength, and also the color in the cup will be much more. So I will talk a little bit about the methodology of tea manufacture, because it is relevant to understanding the differences. In low elevation teas, they cater to the Middle Eastern markets, where they are looking for teas with strong, full-bodied flavor, and they are also looking for cup color. Whether they add milk or not, they still want it fairly dark. And so the techniques of manufacture are adjusted to suit that. So it's market oriented. The mid elevation teas are a little more, I would say, a little on the high elevation side. They could, if they have the elevation up in the 2000 to 3000 elevation, you might be able to produce some flavor in the tea, especially during the flavor seasons. But rest of the time they can go for a strong liquor with more color and cater to the markets that require that. The high elevation teas, of course, are made for flavor, and the techniques of manufacture are changed, with a shorter wither, a shorter rolling period, and shorter oxidization period, and even a shorter drying period to achieve the flavor profile that is needed. Now, withering, which is the first stage of manufacture, is the removal of 50% moisture. It's done in withering troughs, where the leaf is spread out, and then air is blown from underneath for it to remove the moisture, for the removal of moisture. It's called withering. It can take as much as 12 hours to 14 hours at times. If it has a lot of moisture in the ambient air, it will take a longer time. But in the high elevations where the air is less humid, it would take much shorter time, maybe 4 to 6 hours. That is determined by the amount of moisture, and the amount of moisture can be measured with a hygrometer. It gives you the difference between the wet and dry bulb, and that is a way of measuring the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. So during frosty nights, especially up in the mountains, high elevation estates, manufacture would start around midnight, because that's the wither is ready and the leaf has been primed for manufacture. The leaf comes into the factories in the morning, usually, sorry, not in the morning, but in the afternoon, after harvesting is done. So it comes in at around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and goes on till about 6 o'clock. They are spreading the leaves for withering, and then it's left to wither. It might take, as I said, 4 to 6 hours, or 6 to 8 hours, or maybe even 10 hours. And then when it's ready, it has to be rolled. Now, rolling is a process where the leaves are first twisted and then broken. In the twisting action of a leaf, the juices from within the cells come to the surface and gets coated on the surface, and that's what happens when you then dry it. It sticks onto the leaf, and then when you put it in water, it comes out and gives the flavor and the color. Now, in the rolling process, the cells are ruptured and oxygen is able to get inside, and that's when oxidization takes place. Now, oxidization in some books and in some people refer to it as fermentation. It's a common term, but there is no alcohol being formed in tea processing. So therefore, I prefer to use the term oxidization rather than fermentation. Now, in the oxidization process, there are chemicals that are being converted into very favorable compounds, which are tasty compounds. Green tea itself, the green leaf itself, is terrible. It's like trying to make tea out of grass. You cannot drink that. But once it is processed, the chemical transformation makes it possible for us to enjoy a nice cup of tea. So, in low country estates, we were looking to produce color and strength in the tea. In high elevation estates, we are looking to produce flavor in the tea. And color is not important. You'll find that when I brew this, you will see that the color is much less in the high elevation tea. So what makes these differences in the way of market and in terms of price? Again, that's a variable thing too, because it all depends on global demand, depends on shortages in certain areas, and excessive production in certain areas. So that's a variable thing. But irrespective of what the markets are, the managers and the farmers and the growers will produce the best quality of tea that they can under the circumstances that they have. So that is the nice thing about tea production and tea manufacture. Every day it's a different story. Today the leaf may come from a certain region in your farm or tea estate with a mix of cultivars, and tomorrow they'll be harvesting in a different region, and so the leaf that comes into the factory has a different mix of cultivars. So then we have to make a decision about the amount of oxidization, the amount of withering that is going to be done, the amount of drying that is to be done. So those are all variable factors, and there is no machines to deliberate that. It is determined that. It is purely the skill of the people who work there, using the sense of smell and the sense of touch. Especially in the withering, when 50% of the moisture is removed from the leaf, it gets sticky. It's very gummy to the touch. And that's a way of determining when it is it can be crushed into a ball-shaped mass of leaves, which does not expand. It will be just tight-fisted. If you keep it in a tight fist, it will be like a ball. That is when it is ready for withering. In the case of rolling, once the rolling takes place and you touch the leaves, which is very moist at that time because some of the juices have come out, it will be very sticky. And then of course the dry leaf, the black tea, will be very dry to the touch. But how do you determine the wither? Is by simply by touching the leaves and making it into a ball and see whether it will open up again. If it does, that means it's not yet ready and it has to be further withered for it to be then ready for rolling. Withering is a conditioning of the leaf for rolling. But rolling is the most important factor, because that is when the cells rupture, oxygen get in, and the chemical changes start to take place. Drying is the termination of oxidization. So at the right time, the tea is dried to almost 0% moisture, and that completely stops further oxidization. So drying is actually the termination of oxidization. So that is the important thing to remember. Oxidization cannot continue forever. If it is too little oxidization, the taste will not be developed. And if it's too much of oxidization, then again you're losing flavor. It's at that optimum temperature, optimum oxidization level, the tea leaves have to be dried. All right, so let's taste these teas. I'm going to taste it. Unfortunately, you don't have the chance to do that, but I want to show you the cup colors and the infusion colors and how it's going to look in the cup. So for that, I have measured or weighed out 2 grams into each cup, and I'm going to brew this and this at 5 minutes. This is 5 minutes, this is 4 minutes, and this is 3 minutes. And temperature of water is very important. I'm going to use 208 degrees for that. I'm going to use 195 for this one, and only 175 for this one. Because if it is less oxidized, you are looking at a semi-oxidized tea, and a semi-oxidized tea could be slightly bitter or astringent. Astringence is a good character, but bitterness is not. People don't like bitterness. It's at that critical stage that the tea must be ready to drink. So if you increase the temperature too much, you will find that the character of the leaf is such that it will produce a slight bitterness, which can also happen if you extend the brewing period. So one has to be very careful. That's like a green tea, a green tea, you have to be very, very careful about making green tea. So these teas, although they are black teas, they are more like a oolong tea. Oolong teas are semi-oxidized teas. And they are not called oolong teas, but they are black teas, but still they have the character of an oolong tea. So I'm going to do this at 208, as I said. Okay, and let's put the timer for 5 minutes. And this is going to also, back up a little bit. I'm going to add some cold water to that to drop the temperature to 195 from 208. So let's do that way. Okay, and I'm going to watch so now it's 4:30. I'm going to it'll be ready at 30 seconds above 0. So all right, and for this one I'm going to do the change of temperature in the pot itself. By adding some cold water, this will drop to 175, a little bit more. Okay, there we are. So 175 it is. There we go. And we are going to do a 3-minute brewing time for that. So this has another 3 minutes and 10 seconds to go. This one has about 2 minutes and 45 seconds to go. So the important thing up here to realize is that you don't have to stick to exactly these temperatures and for the brewing times and the amount of tea leaves that I use. You can vary that entirely up to your taste. You can play around with it. Just try it yourself. Just try to brew that same tea with 4 grams, for example, keeping the other 2 factors constant. That is, the temperature the same and steeping time the same. Just increase the tea. Next time you could try keeping the tea leaves at 2 grams, but increasing the temperature or reducing the temperature. And again, the next time you can try extending the brewing time. So those variables you will find will alter the taste of the tea. The taste and the color of the tea will change. So as what you will see here. It's very interesting to play around with it, because any tea can be brewed at a different temperature, and you will find the outcome will be different. So there is no hard and fast rule to say that you should use 3 minutes or 4 minutes, and you should steep only for use the temperature exactly at 175 or whatever. There are variables, and it's up to you to know your tea. You've got to know your tea and to gauge what temperature you should use, what steeping time you should have, and how much tea to use. That's the fun part of tea drinking and tea brewing. That's the fun part. Just play around with it. So that is almost becoming ready. It is 15 seconds to go. And here we go. And this is already done. That's 3 minutes. Okay, so we'll do this one first. Okay, that's ready too, right? And then this is okay. And this was took a little time longer than I would have liked to. All right. So here we have the low elevation, mid elevation, and the high elevation teas. I'm going to show you the infusion, what the infusion looks like. It's the leaves are much larger than in its black dried form that's called an infusion, and it's very coppery, which is it's a very good character, very nice color. You could say that it has been a very well made tea. And same with this, the color in the cup, the color in the infusion says a lot. The infusion also shows that it is very even, the particle sizes are even, and the color is even in the particles. So that is that. And in this one, you see that the color is a little different. It's less coppery, it's more greenish. It has a greenish hue, and that is because of the lower oxidization. But it is a very, very uniform, well-made tea, and that is important to know. Right, so it's not easy to see those colors, so I'm going to pour this out to a glass teacup. So that you can see the color, cup color. All right, so let's see. There. So you see that this cup is much lighter than the others. Now, this cup is not as dark as this. That's because the particle size. The larger particle size will have less color if you keep the other factors constant. So this one is a smaller size of leaf, so the color is more. It's a question of surface area per gram or per pound. Surface area is more, therefore there is more color. In this case, it is even smaller. The particle size is even smaller, but cup color is much less. That's because the oxidization level has been reduced. So those are the critical factors governing color. That also can happen when you do in the rolling process. There are so many factors actually that contribute to color and taste, and that is something that you got to understand and appreciate, because no two teas will come out the same way, even though they are manufactured in the same factory. So there are so many variables. So let's taste this and see. Oh, wonderful. This has a very, very smooth taste. Absolutely no astringency, no bitterness, but it lacks flavor of that of the high elevation teas. It is, I wouldn't call it a good flavor tea, but it is an excellent tea for the way it is made, for the market that it is made for. You feel the strength of the tea up on the top of the tongue, and a slight flavor on the sides of the tongue and under the palate. The mid elevation tea, as I said, they could go either way. They could, if the climatic conditions are suitable, they can go to make more color and more strength. If on the other hand, if the climatic conditions are more suitable for a lower oxidized tea, they can go this way. And so they come in between. They have the best of both worlds, so to speak. Again, it's very, very smooth. It doesn't have a whole lot of flavor, but it is a very, very tasty and rounded tea. I would say that if I had the option of uh, drinking either of these teas, I would prefer to drink this as a standalone tea, and I would add milk to this tea. But again, I would make it a little stronger and then add milk to that tea. But this one is definitely a standalone tea. Full of flavor. Now, flavor is defined, unless you experience it, it's very difficult to explain that. It has to be somebody who has tasted so many black teas to know the differences. The the most the easiest way of explaining this flavor is to relate it in terms of a Darjeeling tea that comes from India. Now that is a really, really a connoisseur's cup, the Darjeeling teas from India. That is my standard of flavor. First flush, second flush teas that are produced March, April, May, not so much May, March, April, and that is the standard, I would say. Now, Ceylon, Sri Lanka cannot produce that kind of flavor because that is inherent in the soil and the climate and so many factors, and more than anything else, the cultivars itself. But it comes close to that during January, February, when the hygrometric differences are very, very, very much greater than normal. The concentration of chemical compounds, the polyphenols in the leaf, makes it possible to produce good quality flavored teas. But you cannot compare it with a Darjeeling. It comes close to them, but never as good as a Darjeeling. The Darjeelings have a muscatel character, which is totally lacking in Ceylon teas. These are excellent teas. Excellent teas. They fetch a very good price. But because I have a certain standard when I talk about flavor. Now, some people describe these teas in terms of apples and oranges and such things. Now, I cannot possibly, I think it's sacrilege to use, to say that this has an apple flavor or a strawberry flavor or something like that, because that is not the way you describe a tea. And it is subjective. My taste pattern, my taste will be different from the other person's taste, and he or she would taste this tea and feel a different taste than what I would feel. But the important thing is to know that these are high quality teas. Quality is a combination of all the factors. Quality is the color, the strength, the flavor, the mouthfeel, the roundness, the boldness, everything put together. Quality. Flavor is a more defined expression of taste at a much higher level. And that is something that you have to acquire. That is a being able to differentiate that and to be able to feel that is something that you have to experience. So that's about all that I'm going to talk about right now. And we will have some questions. We have some questions that have come up, and I will deal with those. Um, but remember that each of these segments, like withering and rolling and drying and oxidization, there's so much more information. You can learn about it. Some of that can be learned by reading, but there is nothing to uh, substitute a actual visit to a tea factory. If you get the opportunity to do that, that's what you should do, and go through the process of a manufacture, and that would be the best way to learn and to understand the transformation that takes place. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Um, and I will be right back. I'll take a short break and I'll be right back with answering questions. Thank you.